If everybody would take seat, please, and come in. That would be nice, and I would be very pleased about it. So it will take a little more time for us to start until everybody has come down here. But slowly, slowly, the foyer empties and the people are coming back into the room. There are exciting desks with books in the foyer, and it is desired that people take it as an occasion to network, to talk, to find new ideas, and to exchange opinions. And we will have a break later. And also after the event, you can talk together over there. It will all end at about, at the latest, 10 o'clock p.m. And until then, yeah, you might still have some exchange in the foyer, if you please. Dear listeners, I welcome you for the 22nd International Peace Conference. I welcome you here in the room of the University of Philosophy, and I welcome everybody online on the stream. Welcome very much also all of peace, friends of peace from Munich, from all over Germany and the whole world. In representation of this internationality, I would also welcome Mr. Joe Murray from Ireland, from the Peace Initiative EFRI, who has explicitly come here to our conference on this occasion. Are you here in the room, Joe? Well, he's here for the whole weekend, so we are already networking, and it's becoming ever more important that we do so. I also welcome all members of the organizations of our circle of supporters. Delegates from these organizations have prepared this event for you today, which are DFG-VK, Regional Pax Christi, Munich Freising with Martin Pilgrim, the guy with the photos, then of the project group Munich Security Conference Changing. Mr. Lindemann is not here. Network Peace, Ulla Klotz, who has taken care of all the people with food and drink. So those who help us here and the referents. NatWist, scientists in responsibility for peace and chance. International Women's League for Peace and Security, and of IPPNW, Dr. Hildegard Fischer and Rachel Hoffmann, and Dr. Josef Raab is also just taking a break, but I hope he's soon coming back to the organizational team. This H&V educational, this is
I would like to thank all the donors who have rendered this peace conference possible. The only institutional donor is still the Bertha von Sutter and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundations. Because as you may have read in the newspapers, that 2 weeks ago the Green and Grüne Rosa Liste filed an application asking to stop the promotion of the peace conference, and a week later we got a letter that there won't be any donations anymore. And a week ago, the cultural ministry department assumed that this would only be a framework for future promotion of projects, and they want to focus on arts and culture and political events, or especially events looking at global politics will no longer be given any subsidies. And there has been a lot of unrest and a lot of support for us, and the politicians have realized that they must differentiate here. Well, on the 29th, there will be a hearing, and they will talk to us, and all the organization committee will be in this talk, and one subject will be the combatants for peace. So far, we haven't had any questions or any criticism, and again, all these questions concerning our contrast are from other parts. And I would ask you to give generous donations. We feel it's so important that the peace movement stays alive and continue to prevail even in the shape of this conference. You can make your donations on the peaceconference.info, and you can either remit the money or you can donate the money here, and we can also confirm your donation today for larger amounts of money. To the very best of my knowledge, there are books you can buy, also books by our lecturers today, and you can even ask them to sign these books after the event. Some general information. We would like to inform you that we have the online stream, and that pictures will be doing. The stream will take you from the point. If you do not agree to pictures, please let me or Julia know. Therefore, we will delete you on probable photos. We would like to welcome our guests, Samalivi and Ilivat, and we will hear from you later on. Our presentation, as well as the discussions, will be streamed on YouTube in German and English, and the presentations will be recorded on YouTube, and we will publish them on our homepage, and you can have a look at them again. And we will have translations. The German and English presentations will be given in original. If you want the translation into German for the English presentation, we have headsets for you for simultaneous interpreting. And the same, of course, the other way around. If you are an English native speaker and want the translation, you just have to set the right channel. We will have the same procedure of the evening as yesterday. We will have the input by our lecturers, and then there will be a short time for questions. And after the break, we will have another round of lectures. We are all responsible to make a change, to make a difference. And yesterday we had a look at the conflicts, and we analyzed the conflicts. Today we would try to have a look at the positive side, good steps. What we in your questions, please do not reflect the problem so much. I'd rather ask you to see where could our path lead us. What could be the next step? The chat function for people listening to our other streams. You need to register on Google, and you could join our chat and join our discussion. We would be very pleased. Our topic today: peace in progress, alternatives to militarism and globalism. Peace. The German translation is that peace is progress, alternatives to militarism and capitalism, and that's what we are aiming at today. We want to focus on peace. We want to give arguments to give us a good position in discussions. We want to encourage you to become involved in public discussions, even if people ridicule us. We want to talk again. We want to exchange opinions again. We would like to start this evening with a short survey. We will start with Dr. Mobanza Bambu. His topic is there is no normality from the perspective of the global south. Then we will go on with Professor Müller, who dares to approach the subject of pacifism, and Professor Yanis Varoufakis, who will speak after. Unfortunately, he asks for your apology as he has so many press talks at the moment. It's a pleasure for me to welcome Mrs. Barbara Pöschl-Edrich, who will play a song on her harp for us. I would like to take advantage of this moment to be silent in memory of Alexei Navalny.
Thank you very much for this musical start into the evening.
Das Grußwort sprechen heute
Today we are receiving greetings from Rotem Levi and Osama Elibad from the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Organization Combatants for Peace, who have extended their speakers tour in Germany to come here to us in Munich as well. Welcome here. Osama Ilgard from Jericho is a member of Combatants for Peace and founder of Visit Palestine. He dedicated his life against Israeli occupation and is speaking with organizations from all over the world about how to come to peace. Rotem Levi is activist and doctor, and during his medical studies at Ben Gurion University, he was occupied with Arab lesson and studies on the Palestinians. There are more than 100 initiatives for dialogue in the Holy Land, some on the Israeli side, some on the Palestinian sides, and some with two equal directors from both sides, like, for example, Gush Shalom, Shalom Ashaf, Palestine-Israel Journal, or the Parent Circle, Parent-Family Circle, Family Forum, who spoke our greetings yesterday online. And another little plant is here with us today, the peace fighters, the combatants for peace. For almost 20 years, women and men are organized in this group who formerly were fighters, either Israeli soldiers or Palestinian fighters. We are looking forward to your greetings. Bye.
And it gives us a lot of hope to see you. We are here since 4 months, traveling all around Germany, giving talks about our personal stories, about our situation and how to get out of the current situation. So we invite you tomorrow to watch the documentary about our movement, and afterwards we will give a talk and you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Yes.
Good evening again. I want to thank all of you for coming and give us this time and this opportunity to talk to you, because if you feel your pain, you are alive, and if you feel other people's pain, you are a human. So in this time where we miss humanity, I want to thank you for coming and giving us this hope and inviting you to come tomorrow to listen to our stories and our narratives. We could agree, we could disagree, but we can also agree to disagree and still friends. We are not here to convince you who's right and who's wrong. We are here to find common way in the middle, to stop killing human beings and stop killing children, because this is more important for us than our political conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotem Levi, Osama Elibad, that you've come here to Munich in these hard times as well, while at home in Israel and Palestine there are difficult times for you. Now I want to talk about our first speaker. Welcome, Dr. Boniface Mabanza Bambu. Only this week you've returned from your official journey to the Global South, in particular to Zambia, Namibia and South Africa. And you work as a coordinator at the workshop Economy with the Christian Agency for Southern Africa in Heidelberg. Your work is focused on the key issues of trade politics, raw material politics and globalization. You were born in the Democratic Republic of Congo during the military dictatorship of Mobutu and studied philosophy, literature and theology in Kinshasa. After your studies, you did a doctorate at Münster University on Justice Can Only Exist for Everyone, critique of globalization from an African perspective. As a transition to your presentation, I would like to show a short video scene with Franz Beckenbauer from 2014, when the FIFA World Cup was conducted in Qatar under accusations of grave human rights violations. In this sequence, Franz the Emperor, as we call him, is questioned about his experiences with slaves in Qatar. So I have not seen a single slave in Qatar. No one is there in chains or something like this. Well, I've seen nothing to like, so I don't know where these news are coming from. I really don't know. So from the Arab region, I could make myself a different picture, and I think this is far more realistic. There was not a single slave, no. An outrageous statement. One could laugh about it, but it's just too bad. But it shows what views are still existing in the global north. We are looking forward to your lecture. Mr. Mabanza. Have a wonderful evening. I thank you very much for the introduction and for the welcoming, and above all for the invitation to participate in this peace conference. I would like to start with a moment of silence for the victims of violence and war worldwide. And often it is so that the worst suffering does not take place where the big cameras of the world are looking at, but in places which out of coincidental criteria remain invisible. And this is maybe also what is said in this clip, what is perceived and where it is perceived, and what do people not see, and which voices remain unheard. And in moments as we speak here, most of us do not know that in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of the most terrible tragedies is taking place. My issue is not simple. It is not easy because it's not simple because we have planned that I will speak about there is no normality from the perspective of this global south. And the complexity derived from this is that the one single perspective of the global south, the view at the current situation in the world and at the causes of this, such a perspective does not exist. What exists are common experiences of colonization, of enslavement, of dehumanization, and what also exists is the impacts and results which are still present, even though they are perceived in a very different way, depending on the perspective, on positioning of the people in the so-called global south. The so-called self-acclaimed elites in the countries of the global south, who the tragic alliances with power centers in these worlds, they see the results of the culture of death. They have another perspective on this than the normal people in these countries. And so the term global south or global north these terms are just an attempt to draw the classic lines between north and south, west and northwest, geographically or not geographically seen, to break open these lines in order to understand that those who profit from the ruling system can be found everywhere. And likewise, as in the so-called global north, there are people who profit, there are also losers of the ruling system. And it's the same in the south, where not only losers, but also people and groups and constellations who are worldwide networking with power centers and profit from the situation. And this is what I want to say. The countries of the global south are not the same and partly have very diverging interests. It becomes clear that the global south is not a homogeneous space. It does not form a unity, and it is, and as I tried to explain along the conduct of the elites, it's no Disneyland. There is corruption, there are warmongers, but, and this is my first message, being holy is not a precondition for being just. In addition, the concerns of the societies of the global south, there where they follow particular interests or transcend them and privilege their historical experiences, that they have these spaces in common, that they, in the current political, so that some of these powers, if they identify with concerns of the global south, they do so not because they have the power relations in view to the advantage of the global south, but because they want to use them for themselves and for their own profits. And that is exactly where my second message sets in. The taking over of these concerns, the instrumentalization of these concerns of the global south through certain power constellations in the current situation serves within many elites in the so-called West as a pretext to discredit these concerns and call everything that happens as and devaluate everything that happens as a Russian or Chinese propaganda. And this is wrong as well. Those who read the current dynamics like this see in the Russian war of aggression against their neighbor Ukraine the beginning of the largest catastrophe of the past years. Even this war is for humanity in Ukraine, and not only the soldiers and their families, but also for the civilian population. It is a catastrophe for the families of the concerned Russian cities and the families of the soldiers in Russia. It is also a catastrophe, but the people in Libya, where NATO had led war, and Iraq and Afghanistan, or in the eastern Congo, where a sort of proxy war is being led. The catastrophe did not start only 2 years ago. It's been going on for a long time already. The outcry in Western political circles was not comparable, if it was there at any time at all, with a view at all those catastrophes worldwide. This has to do with this war between Russia and Ukraine, that the awareness of a crisis that has developed during the corona pandemic has increased, and it has become palpable, more palpable, what it means for the standard of living in the West if there are global disturbances to global supply chains. Normal means that Western countries can have access to cheap energy, cheap agriculture and mineral raw materials, and thanks to a trade policy which they control and influence to dominate the markets. For the majority of the people in societies of the global south, their existence has always been suffering from crisis. The normality which others want to reconstruct is for them nothing to reach out for, because the situation at the beginning of this war was no normality at all. There was no normality for them. That is, their normality was a catastrophe already before. In order to illustrate this a bit, a few examples. Many of them suffer from hunger because there was an agricultural policy practiced with all means which places profits of agricultural concerns above human rights. They suffer from poverty and perspectivelessness because the ruling trade policy stabilizes colonial relations, while others in the Western, for example, are speaking of energy change at the cost of those who have the resources. They themselves have nothing to change because they are still suffering from energy poverty. Climate change has been destroying for years their basic needs for life, and climate sinners do not take any responsibility for this shame, which they cause through their standards of living. But for these standards of living, raw materials are necessary, agricultural, energetic, mineral raw materials. But those who have to bear the brunt, have to bear the So social costs remain in the south, and environmental costs, and so looking for new perspectives. And if there are people coming to Europe in order to look for new perspectives, they are facing new asylum laws and other such stuff. All these wrong developments cannot be corrected by militarization, but with peace and justice, and a sense for justice. In many places where I've been speaking and tried to convey this message, I got to hear, Mr. Mabanza, this is just elusive what you're talking about. You make things even more complex than it is. My answer is, those who, if you believe that bombing would help us from the worst, those are the people who live in an illusion. Reality is that we have to face this complexity in order to understand the necessity for peace, because all these tasks, the reform of trade policy, of agricultural policy, of debt policy, of raw materials policy, all this is asking for such a lot of attention and strength to invest, which we have to take on as a humanity as a whole, to avoid and to prevent the largest catastrophes. And therefore we have to return and find back to a peace agenda. And this means not only to increase the means for militarization, but to realize exactly as soon as possible to get out of this major catastrophe, for us all together working on how to reform and how to bring progress in a way that enables us to create a world order which allows for a life in dignity for all. My 25 minutes are slowly ending. That's why I want to avoid the organizers not to become nervous. I want to try to formulate something like a conclusive word in my political engagement, and I try to convey it tonight in a few minutes. I do not stand up for the triumph of the individual groups, persons, like however they might be named. I stand for the triumph of humanity in every person and everywhere. I don't fight in order to have the countries of West Africa, where it's also burning in many corners and places, the French flag, to replace the French flag to a Russian or a Chinese flag, but for the triumph of humanity, of human rights in Western Africa. I would be utterly dissatisfied if African women, from the many catastrophes of their long stories, histories of suffering since the 15th century, would conclude the necessity to mobilize their spiritual, human and natural resources for the benefit of those who can want to make use of it. So all catastrophe that might have happened everywhere in the world should bring with them the lesson: no, never again, and for all and everywhere, never, never again. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Mubanza. Thank you very much for reminding us to rediscover our humanity, the humanity which means that we are all linked, that we all depend on one another, and the radical situation hits us all. Thank you for giving us the perspective that we as human beings have to open up our eyes and do not see our experience as the only true experience in the world, but to recognize the manifold realities and facts. Now I would invite you to let us have your question. As today we have 3 men on our podium, on our panel, I would like to encourage the women to become involved in the discussion, and I would like to keep this equal. Thank you very much. Who would like to ask? I've got a question here. Are there more questions? Let's get started. I would be interested where you see the solutions all over Africa, that the income arrives at the income from commodity trade, from export of goods to the north and into the world. How can the money achieved this way can really arrive in the population of these countries? Thank you very much. The biggest challenge for Africa is to put the resources available there in the service of the problems of the African continent. There may be a few exceptions, but the large trend is the land that all the countries are very much internationally oriented. This is a heritage from colonialism. If you see the infrastructures We see tests to change that, but if you know the continent, you will know that the biggest infrastructures go from the production centers to the harbors, to the airports, and from there into the rest of the world. And therefore, many countries of the continent stay in the role that was defined for them during colonial times as suppliers of commodities for the rest of the world. If you, for example, think of chocolate. Two countries, Ivory Coast and Ghana, produce more than 80% of cocoa beans worldwide, but the 200 biggest companies exporting chocolate, there is not a single one from these two countries. The value added measures are done somewhere else. And this shows that most of the money is created elsewhere. What the share that should be there, you see that the African continent does not only lose resources, material resources, as well as human resources, but also financial resources. For example, by illicit capital investments, and the African loses more money than it gains from development aid and remittances. This is the largest challenge. What can we do? This is just the thing I'm asking for. That's why I'm here. We need structural reform. This structural reform translates in the area of finances into how can we make sure that tax shelters are stopped. To send money out of these African countries, you need these tax shelters. And the African Union has shown 60% of the money leaving the African continent are used for real economy somewhere else and in the direction of tax shelters. And international groups even have accounting that the conclusion was that let's transnational groups make more transparent. In exchange, we can do something from here. We need political pressure from here because these groups come from here. These structural reforms then can be continued in trade policies in a week or 2 weeks. I will fly to Abu Dhabi to the Minister Conference of the World Trade Organization. And for years, we have been formulating concrete suggestions of how to reform trade policies to make African countries profit on it. But we do not get past these old structures and their conflict of interest that they block everything. Thank you very much. Can we go on to the next question? We have got several questions here, but also people on the balcony are invited. Please let us have your question. There's a microphone up there. The first chat question, we will collect 3 questions. And from the chat we have a question. BRICS. Is this a neo-colonial organization or is it a chance for more justice? My question and my curiosity is, you said and we know that this is a worldwide problem, that there are always profiteers and elites who make sure that they reap the profits, whereas the rest of humanity is not important for them. And my question is, what can we do to counteract that? Recently, I thought, well, what's the difference between pride and joy? And I found that pride is something I want for myself, and joy is something I share with the others. And the question is, what can be done against the profiteers? In my opinion, there are only three routes we can take. First of all, we let them feel what it means to have little, and the second is to have legal guidelines that stop them, the political way, or to create pressure. And now, that's my question. One more question. My question would be education, skilled labor, lack of skilled labor. Could this make a change? How many universities are there in Africa? How many students gain and drain? Yeah, that's a good. Can education change the situation? Could there be a change if money for education, paying for education, would be abolished? The first question, BRICS, is it a neo-colonial structure or a chance? I would tend to say to cross out neo-colonial. I would rather talk about a constellation which offers chances as well as risks. In my presentation, I sketched that there is a risk of African countries, including South Africa, Ethiopia, and that these countries part from the existing colonial structures, and I would like to turn around the question and watch them from the perspective of the African countries themselves. And it depends whether these countries, with their long history of suffering, now have to solve several tasks at the same time. One of these tasks is to cope with the traumas of a violent history to an end that they now have to develop coherent concepts of themselves in a way that they can say, that's what we are. We do not want to be what others want us to be. What are we? Which potential can we tap? Where do we want to be in 30 or 50 years? And which relations do we need to others outside of Africa to become what we want to become? And this would render it possible to to see all offers from outside, be it China, be it Russia, be it USA, to check them for what we want to be, without such a concept, which is autonomous and is implemented autonomously to become a playground in a world of rising competition between the big players. The second question. Yes, I would agree to what you said. Gandhi once said, the world has enough for the needs of all of us, but not for the greed of all of us. And it depends on to limit greed, and that's a decisive factor. We require laws that can control this greed. This sounds very martial, but the reality, that's just reality. At a certain point, you are right. It's a cultural level you mentioned. We need a different image of humanity. We need a cultural revolution, which renders it possible for us to return to the basics. And the basics are, and they turn around the question, what is a human being? What does it make? What is life? What is a life that is worth living? And if we answer these questions, we will find out that our civilization has developed in a direction that is not good for us. What we need is a new discovery of traditions. They can be found everywhere in the West, but they have been forgotten due to the search for more and faster, bigger accumulation of wealth. But there are these rich traditions, these treasures, especially in cultures that haven't had an ear so far because they are considered to be inferior. Creating rooms where we have intercultural competence and develop this competence for global justice is just the task that's called for at the moment. The last question, and I have to admit, next time I come to Munich, I will read up a bit about the number of universities in Africa, but I can comfort you and tell you the African societies are going through a phase of change. We have their own forms of education. Then we had colonialism, and due to colonialism, education was translated into school, European type of school, universities, and so on. And they entered this route, and all countries have loads of institutions of this kind. But these institutions are not always in a position from their perspectives, from their curriculum, to educate people who are able to solve the problems in these societies, partly because they are internationally oriented in their education. A large bit of joy for me, and also my hope, is that the understanding of this problem is growing. And understanding means that many countries are now thinking about how to create a synthesis to combine. We need technical skills to solve concrete human problems, water supply, health system, and so on. But what we need is the development of human skills to serve their societies. It doesn't help us to have academics with doctorates from Munich, London, and Chicago, but who also have their heads in Munich, New York, and Chicago, and who do not understand the realities of African societies. Thank you very much. I would now have to ask you to remember your questions, because we need to start with our next lecture, and there will be a discussion round with all our lecturers, and I would ask you to keep your questions in mind and enter our discussion later on. Let me go on with our second lecturer.
Welcome, Professor Olaf Müller, Professor for Philosophy. Since 2003, you have been teaching at the Humboldt University in Berlin, with your major field being philosophy of nature and science. Thus, you focus on justice issues in climate policy, for example, and your book, published in 2002, shows with pacifism theory. You are one of the few, or maybe the last pacifist among the philosophers. What's going on? You yourself once said that things were different at the time you studied philosophy and maths in Göttingen. In your books, you defend, apart from pacifism, also Goethe's assault on Newton's optics, and in your recent publication, Too Beautiful to Be Wrong, you analyzed the astonishingly extensive role the sense of beauty has been playing for the development of modern physics. More on these issues, dear listener, is available on Olaf Müller's website, farbenstreit.de. Often in history, pacifist principles inspired non-violent resistance against colonialism. Human rights movements and campaigns for environmental justice often apply pacifist methods, though this might also lead to an ethical dilemma. Some activists wonder whether non-violent resistance is sufficient to counteract the economic and political powers of the neo-colonial forces effectively. We are pleased to have you here, and we are looking forward to your lecture. Welcome, Professor Olaf Müller. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and angels and everybody else. I'm very thankful that I can be here, and I have brought for you some thoughts about, from a philosophical perspective, which is very close to the demand of my of the speaker before, that we need a new image of humanity. And I want to describe to you the contents of my book and widen the perspective, as I was asked by the organizers. So it's a sort of report. And the first part of my lecture will be the first four most important point of pacifism. The one is that the position keeps to the idea that war and war waging is morally doubtful, whether in attack or in defense. We all know it's questionable in attack. We know it all, but often people think that in defense violence might be okay. And also I don't like this word morally bad or so. I rather try to listen to the nuances in between and not to think in black and white only, which could be substantiated somehow by this pacifist message as a expression of tendency. The more warful an action is that you are currently planning, the more doubtful it is. It is very warlike to extinguish a city, but it is also warlike to destroy a tank. It is warlike to destroy bridges, but it's also already warlike to do researches on weapons and to deliver weapons to warring parties. And I think it's better to formulate it this way than in black and white. One important mark of this pragmatic pacifism is that instead of looking at black and white principles, you announce at that and stop with this thought ethical principle focus. We don't have to do it. We just can say we are always against a war, and if you had this position, you didn't have to look more closely at the things. We should rather open our eyes and look at the tragedies of the whole world and activate our compassion and look with shock but also with love to find a way forward. And there was an important element which is different from the pacifism from the 1980s. We would stop this moral I'm the right one, you are not. I think it's part of the pacifist position to look at oneself and to see that there is no guarantee that you are always on the right side, that you have a white vest. You always have to risk. You always risk to become guilty, and you have to look in. You have to accept it as a reality that this can happen anytime. And yeah. And the second part, I want to bring you an example for an exception from this prohibition of war. Two of the most important thinkers of the last century and very important pacifists were Albert Einstein and Bertrand Russell, the big logicists and philosopher. Both were pacifists for all their life. And when the Nazis started to throw Europe into the abyss, they said, in this case, our pacifism is reaching a limit. We think the war against Nazi Germany is right. And Nazi took this position later than Einstein, because Einstein, who had to flee from Berlin already earlier. And he wrote to an old friend, I'm trying to keep to my pacifism, but I'm not certain that I can succeed. And then a few months later, he noted that in the face of the attack on Poland, he would no longer keep to the idea that every war was wrong. And this didn't mean that he would accept every single action in this war, but when he was a bit more reluctant about this, he said something very important, which was, if we enter into the war against Nazi Germany, we will, with time, become ever more barbaric with time. And this is no wrong observation. If you look at the Britons, if you had told them that at the beginning of the Second World War that they would extinct German cities with bombs, they would not have believed it. But after a few days, they were that far. And Russell also coined a sentence after the war: remember our humanity and forget the rest. And I think this fits very much with what was suggested in the lecture before. Now in the third part, I would like to turn to the method which you would apply in the ways of thinking with regard to the catastrophes which are taking place. It's about us trying to follow certain guiding principles, looking at reality. So I cannot bring political suggestion or something like this now, but I try to look over one's shoulder, over our shoulders, how we can better think and assess things we see with regard to this. And we shouldn't start with basic principles, try to address the situation with principles, but rather look at what is going on. And there is one pessimistic and one optimistic view. The optimistic way could be condensed into that everybody first is at all is good. Every person is good by nature. Pacifists know that everybody can be made, can be brought into a situation to change. But first of all, we can start with everybody is a good person, working with a good mixture of reason and emotion, and renouncing that doing anything bad to other people. So this is an optimistic sentence, and for this sentence, pacifists are always seen as crazy guys. But the point is that this sentence might be taken as a guiding principle to look at reality. We can try to find the few flickerings of hope that are there in the world and try to learn something about it. And writing history has always been all about battles and generals and everything, and we still have not found a way to look at situations where people have succeeded without weapons and without all this war. And this should really be deepened. We need a feminist way of writing history and looking at the role of women in history. Well, not only this perspective, but it has to be taken up as well. And we need history writing, taking up the perspectives from the global south. This is also does almost not exist, and also we need history writing showing possibilities how to resolve conflicts in a peaceful way. And I think we will find there very much more than we are always made believe. But if we don't look at things like this, and if we don't have the hope to find such things, we won't find it. This is somewhat related to the thing of beauty you mentioned in my introduction. The physicians from the early modernity in physics systematically believed that the deep structures of our universe have to be beautiful. And many people from outside the physics don't see it like this, but the sense of beauty was, has driven them to look into their science. And I just want to say simply that so far with a look at humanity, we have not invested that much. That physicians have started with this risk. We have to start taking on this risk with a view at humanity as well. And in so far optimism, I'm not a dreamer that much that I look at everything. It's not my part of my way of optimism to look at everything as if everything was well. There are major conflicts of humanity which are solved by weapons, and this is the point where those
they think that they can control the war in Ukraine with very fine tuning, and Russia will collapse peacefully and everything will be fine. This is a shape of optimism which I would call ridiculous. And as a pessimist, with a view to the solution of conflicts by weapons. I would go even further. The guideline is look for options, even if the moment weapons should be involved. Look where could these things get out of control, which could be wrong, how could we go into nuclear apocalypse. This does not mean to make panic. You have to face the people. This is not a strange method to be pessimistic and look for. Well, see, if we run nuclear power plants and we have engineers, it's their duty to check for the smallest and tiniest, weakest little error where we might have a maximum critical accident. This is searching for errors, and we, as pacifists, we have to look at things of the danger that we might explode our world with nuclear weapons. This is the worst danger we could do, and here the pacifists are extremely pessimistic and very, very careful. This is a certain mixture of pessimism and optimism, which is just the other way around on the other side. And yeah, I feel on the one hand you're here optimistic or there, and you're here pessimistic or there, and we can make our choice. The question is, where do we want to invest our optimism? I'd rather invest it into human nature than into armed conflicts. Oh. Now, I have to explain the two principles. Unfortunately, we have more than one example. And I used a certain philosophic image, which has happened several times in human history, and have try to describe our circle of life and convictions. And there are this type of philosophy who only sees ratio and only sees that, and all the other things are eliminated. We've seen this this started with Socrates, and this is very, very strong in Western philosophy, and there have been protest movements again, and there is a little island, a paradise in Weimar and Jena. Goethe and Schiller was a little shelter, and this is why they had to get into conflict with Newton. And in old Japan, in ancient Japan, this is why the Japanese love Goethe so much. And it has become most popular in North American pragmatism. And it means that philosophy wants to get away from the pressure of reason and to describe this change. And it has never ever been strong in discussion. I'm sure that it exists in other cultures too. The problem is we as human beings, the humanist image, it fits Goethe very well. We are beings with very, very strong skills and resources. Of course, we've reason, we have observation, we need a good vision of what's going on, and we have to see the suffering there in global South. We need reason. Of course, we need mathematical exacting. And then we have an element which has been really negated in Western philosophy. We can rely on our good emotion, and we can rely our good emotions. They help us to cope with reality. We do not need to push them aside. We need to strengthen and improve them. Before this horrible war started, this terrible attack on Ukraine, I always thought, talking about the feelings that make us, they are good and bad things, pride and joy. And I think there is a clear image of what are feelings who enhance us and form us. For example, love, mercy, compassion, joy. But this also includes fear, and I was surprised to realize that. I do not talk of panic, that's never good, and you close and cannot. But fear is an emotion that helps us to get into close contact with reality and see dangers. This matches the pessimism I mentioned before. This means listening to our fears and learn to cope with them. Now, the target for this image of the human beings, similar to this image of beauty, we have to try to harmonize all those elements. They have to be in an equilibrium. One shouldn't dominate. We need an equilibrium. We will never be perfect at that. We're not wise men and women. But we mortal beings, we will need to keep struggling for it. And we are constantly getting new information, that the terrible events we mentioned. And of course, they disturb this equilibrium, and we always have to try to rebalance that. And we need guidelines. And the examples I brought for war and peace are just plain examples. If we sharpen our vision, and something I take from the previous lecture, and we need to work more, among other things, if we think the whole system that needs to be in an equilibrium, and if we want to improve that, we in particular should try to refrain from seeing somebody else as the stupid ones, the bad ones, the demons. We should always, just for a test, have a look at their perspective and integrate them into our system. Then you will see that we will lose our quiet, and then we need to re-establish harmony. And you need to be prepared to see the suffering of all people and try to develop a feeling of love for everyone. And then you have to realize that you will not get out of that with innocence. And in my opinion, this will result in pacifism. That's different from this reason-dominated way of seeing things back from Socrates. It's not just a uniform, idealistic approach. No matter where you look, you will allow your individual points to balance. And the moment you open up, these systems will mix, and there may be unexpected results. This freedom may cause fear, but you can also feel it and see it as a treat. And there are definitely people like Einstein in many cultures to love human beings in its diversity. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Müller, for your very, very interesting introduction. When you see, okay, these illusionists on the other side, you see the warmongers, and they think they are idealists. If you tell them, well, you are idealists from the other side, they would be surprised. And you see all the discords, all the positive image of human beings, negative image of human beings, and the structures of power on the other hand. But it's very, very important to maintain our humanity, but also check where we can do more, and we cannot accept that to think it was a mistake to develop this humanity, as you said, Mr. And now I'd like to invite a few questions. I'd like to start with with a woman. Thank you very much. I have 2.5 questions. The first is, you mentioned the bombs on Germany on the part of Britain, Hamburg, Dresden, and so on. But the British caused massacres already in the 15th century. And just as a remark, an interesting thing is the aesthetics, the beauty, and the perception of beauty. And you will certainly be aware that the aesthetics theory is European aesthetics theory, and the complete Asian or Oriental theory of it has not really been published. For me, it's a point thinking of literary history. How do you feel about it? That history has only been written by one part. This means the white man. And I notice more and more, even more since October, how little my German fellow citizens know about Orient or the Arab world. And that Arabs are Semites, and they are definitely highly educated people, and I feel your approach is enormous to reform the writing of history, to tell the truth for a change. The other question is feminism and the woman factor. As a woman and mother, I feel more and more that this power is an absolute patriarch way. Neither the woman in Qatar nor the one in Germany is free. The women's position, I do not talk about men and women. I think about the feminine power, the energy, history, how many women were killed, and how much the feminine factor is missing in our society. My father is an Arab, my mother is a German. I have this background, and I strongly notice that this would enter into philosophy. The feminine aspect. I do not talk about gendering, gender correctness. Thank you. May I ask you to put things in a nutshell? We haven't heard a lot about it. This was a very valuable contribution, but may I ask you to keep your questions brief? Thank you very much, Mr. Müller. I'm very, very glad that you mentioned that human beings are good. I can say this from psychoanalytical research on newborns, and they come into the world with a positive image, and you have to do a lot to turn that around. And you did not specify a certain conflict, and it was a general statement. May I point your attention to the line of conflict between the rich and poor? Can you have a new input for us? Because I do not think that people like Bill Gates or the Bidens or Klaus Schwab with his that they will surrender a little bit without their wealth and their power on a voluntary effort. Just a short statement. I'm a mother of 5 and grandchildren. And one of the things I noticed up to, and I struggled first to know, in a cooperation and the basic principle is this preparedness to help, this compassion, this empathy. And I tried several schools with my children, almost all, and it depends on the teacher, but the principle of cooperation against of fighting, I'm the best one and I'm even better, that this principle needs to be eliminated. And I'm a child of war, and I went to school at a time when a lot of kids didn't know how to kids, and there were people who accompanied the children. And how can we change our school system, our education system, to keep up the good traits that are there in our children? Thank you very much for these challenging questions. I would like to ask with to start with the last question. I'm not an expert on didactics, but American pragmatists have done a lot of work in education, and they try to form schools to trigger that. I have 2 daughters, and we desperately were looking for a right school in Berlin, but we didn't find any school that was really good. It's a disaster. But we need to start at the human being as a whole and celebrate the whole human being as a whole. And of course, all we have is a certain form of, there's also this part enjoying competition. But again, this needs to be harmonized. I can't say more because I do not have the know-how there. And now that's quite the same with the question with the gap between rich and poor. Just a short idea. It may sound stupid, but I would like to say it. We might say everybody who emits any climate disturbing gases, and it will be put into one pot, and everyone then gets his share, and we would have to drive with lorries with money and redistribute the money. And I would like to do this without a deduction for every human being. It would be a huge money transfer from the global north to the global south. And I think this also is more of a type of a redistribution. Maybe we will need to make larger reforms. Yeah. And the first question, of course, was the most challenging one, and you put in a load of ideas. You said something very conspiracy. Truth needs to be told. I have come away, if we say the truth, we very often stamp on the ground and say the word. And in writing history, it's very, very, very difficult because the perspective from very end. I do not want one truth. I want many perspectives, and you just have to make them visible because they are underprivileged or they have to be written. And partly, I would say we have to trust that even people coming from another perspective with the right guidelines are able to write it. Not only feminists can write history, or Africans write history and can deal with the global south. We are all human beings. I think everybody should be able to do that. We have to just to open up our eyes. And even if you're not from the group, then we will have to learn a lot. Even if a man writes about women in history, he has to learn a lot. But we have to get the input from everybody, and we need to create attention for a fairer distribution. But there is not one truth. I emphasize there's not one truth. It has to be varied. European aesthetics, yeah, it's true. The aesthetics I investigated in physics is a type of European aesthetics, and it triumphed. And I tried, are there aesthetic elements in other cultures? And for geographical reasons, by coincidence, I had a look in Japan, and I found that they have a lot of converging lines and a lot of very exciting divergences. And it's important to open our eyes, to open our hearts, and I opt for a cosmopolitan aesthetics to get to know creations from other cultures, to understand the context, and of course to treasure that. And this also has this image of ourselves, this image of the human being, to expand this human. And last semester, which is now coming to a close, fortunately, and I had light and dark perspectives of enlightenment. And we said we want light versus dark, reason versus feeling, man versus woman. And we wanted to stop this fixed thinking, and this we want to show the interaction. We wanted to show diversity, to open up our view to. This also includes. This could also be compared to the Chai Yang, to have this feminine power. And in our Western physics and politics, this is completely underrepresented, and we have to focus on that, and we all will grow, and that's the objective of such an endeavor. We have to read the small print. Thank you very much. This is just the right place to be and to become aware of that. And we really have to ask for that and to demand it, because we also see the same power structures in education. We need to fight for these ideas, and if we are brief, we can have one more round of questions. One question's up there, and then a lady. Right, we have a woman here. Yeah. My question would be, is our relative weakness as a peace movement in the fact that very often we have the attitude, but we know what is right, this causes a feeling of arrogance. And very, very often that our demonstrations turn against something. Wouldn't it be much more powerful to have a demonstration for peace, to have this positive branding of what we need? And I'm particularly nervous, even if it's politician, when these people then are degraded. Of course, very direct analysis and anger about injustice should have its room, but maybe you could give us some ideas of how we can improve there. I think your lecture's very, very inspiring, especially the first one, this idea towards a new image of human beings, which both of you show up, this positive image of the human being. And now I'm thinking, for example, here, the African continent could have a better presentation of our world. And the topic of negotiations came up. You know, the basis for negotiations is much better in Africa because there are various powers like China, Russia, the USA, who also can play a trump card against each other, which can be quite a trick in a negotiation. And we have to take this very serious. We have to see the whole. And now the thing you said in the positive direction, if we do not only take the other side serious, but also trust in that this is a human being who can create something good, we would get all those things together and would win something for pragmatic pacifism. There are no strict guidelines which need to be kept. We should consider all requirements, all needs, and we should try to reap the best. And of course, sometimes you need to force people to their own good, especially people who need to surrender power, and very often they are very reluctant to do this. And this is if we have a good basis for our negotiations. If we could also lead negotiations with other partners, we should really use all tools we can tap to save our world. If I may say so, we have to work together to stop climate change. And of course, my question is what you think about that. One more woman on that side. Please make a short question. Well, I just wanted to say something on your lecture. For me, here your lecture for me was a call for emotions, and it's not about emotion, it's about reason. And I would rather plead for reason, because emotionally, very often we are so upset and so pushed that it would be very, very good to plead for reason. May I start with the last point? An attitude without any reason would be fatal. And on the other hand, one where we eliminate all feelings would be fatal too. It's important to get the two positions together. Just a little example. So let's think about fear. If it turns into panic, I'm no longer able to act. I need to get out of the state of panic, and I have to do this with reasonable thinking. Immediately after the attack of Russia on the Iran, people went to South Africa because they had panic to end up in a nuclear war. That's possible, but now in self-defense classes, we are taught when you cross the street at night and you have a strange feeling, it's not good to eliminate that and say, oh, there won't be anything. Listen to it, use the emotion that disturbs you and shake your feeling and have a clear look and have a reasonable look of what's really going on. It's important to get the two sides together. Let's think about love. Love can make you blind. Love is blindness. But in a situation, if you're very, very angry on a person, you try to see this person in another image, to see the beauty in this person and to approach this person. We have changed our emotion, and that just attacks us, and we can get out. Emotions are something that we feel suddenly. We are exposed to our emotions, and then it would be nice to control them a little bit, but not to eliminate them, but to listen to them, to take them seriously, to like them. That's also what makes us as human beings, but also to use it for giving us ideas. I think we do not get as far as we want if we only count on reason. We tried, but we do not rule everything with reason. I think it was really a mistake to talk of having the truth for us. And this is one thing. There are different points of equilibrium, and we need to respect all of them. And we need to balance and to quench all the discord. And this also includes to not to see yourself as the one good person against the evil world. You have to look into the world and be prepared to see the good in it. And if it's to take the power away from politicians, do I shout at him? Do I blame him? Do I threaten him? Do I abuse him? No, I have to try to reawaken the humanity in this person. It may be difficult, but it's possible. And the last one, it's so easy to be against something, and it's so much more difficult to be for something. When you're for something, you need to put power into it. You have to make suggestions, and they have to be carefully thought of. When I pleaded for looking into history, when peaceful, non-violent measures rendered results, and in the first 6 months of this damn war, there was a scientist from Catalonia, and he collected all the instances of peacefulness, and now we have this study, but the study is little known. Why was it not widespread in the media? And there are so many examples of very, very small campaigns and one big thing. And of course, compared to this big event, they're just a little thing. But we have to admit that, and we have to see it into how make concrete suggestions for the future. And if we see the bad Trump will bring a shitstorm over Europe, what about thinking of how we, seeing the threat from Russia, how we can treat with this danger from Russia? What would I demonstrate for? Just a little thing. In Europe, we have this wonderful peace creating instrument called Erasmus. This is where we can exchange students and send them to different. We know they do not go to the libraries and study. No, they have a party. They work together and they start friendships. And this is a wonderful initiative from the European Union. And I'd love to see this with Russia too. Not only Russia. I would also love to see this worldwide. Thank you very much. That's a very, very nice closing word before we have a break. But just a little bit before, we will have a wonderful song.
Oh, everybody there? Nice to see you back. There were more exciting lectures, and we still have a really demanding program ahead of us, of at least 1 hour. I want to introduce and welcome our first speaker. Welcome, Yanis Varoufakis. You are a Greek economist, author, and politician, and a professor of political economics at Athens University. From January to July 2015, you were the Minister of Finance in Greece and led the negotiations with the creditors of the country to get Greece out of the crisis. When the referendum to reject the austerity dictate was not implemented, you resigned from office. In 2016, you co-founded DiEM25, and beyond that are the Secretary General of MERA25, the political party of DiEM25 in Greece. The topic of our lecture today is ways towards a non-aligned and peaceful world. Please allow me a brief words on the still existing movement of non-aligned states, better known as the non-aligned movement, in short NAM. Non-aligned states is the common term for those states who, after the dissolution of the colonial empires, neither joined the capitalist West nor the communist Eastern Bloc. They supported each other in their objectives of self-determination, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and anti-racism. The organization, which was constituted at its first session in Belgrade in 1961, condemned the formation of blocs at the time of the East-West conflict because of the risk of a Third World War and advocated the concept of peaceful coexistence and disarmament. Today, more than 100 states are part of the non-aligned movement, representing 55% of the world population. The movement is thus the second largest alliance of states after the United Nations, where they hold almost 2/3 of the seats at the General Assembly. This year, the 19th summit of the non-aligned movement on non-aligned states took place from January 15th to 20th in Kampala, Uganda. Have you, dear listeners, ever heard about it? I definitely haven't. Nobody. Well, me not either. So we can't count ourselves lucky. We can count ourselves lucky to have Professor Yanis Varoufakis here with us today to talk about the suggestion of a new movement of the non-aligned states who stand. So, Professor Varoufakis, the floor is yours. We are looking forward with pleasure to your speech.
Guten Abend, Dankeschön.
Good evening. Thank you for the introduction.
So much for
Thank
your
you
presence.
so much for your
It's
presence. It's
on a personal note, it's always wonderful to come back to the University of Munich. The first time I was here, it was in the School of Economics in 1987, giving a very different kind of talk. But nevertheless, 1987 was a period of perestroika and glasnost in the Soviet Union, a period of hope here in Germany. The Berlin Wall was about to fall, and we all hoped, whether we were on the left or on the right, that a new era would start, an era where the ticking clock towards nuclear Armageddon or our species extinction would be stopped, and then we could have a nice little discussion between us as to what kind of world of peace and what kind of peace we wanted to build. As we speak today, we have a new Cold War, which, just like the old Cold War, flares up into hideous carnage, whether this is in the fields of Ukraine, or in the land of Israel, Palestine, or in Yemen, or in Kashmir, for that matter, or various other parts of the world where the Cold War between the superpowers erupts into blood and death. The Cold War gave rise, as we heard, to the non-aligned movement. My movements, DiEM25 and MENA25, position on this evolved over the last few years as a rationale of going back to the idea of a non-aligned movement while avoiding the serious mistakes of that non-aligned movement. A few words on my understanding of the new Cold War as I see it. Allow me to start with, well, I'm an economist, I can't help it. So I'm going to start with money. And in particular, I'm going to start with a remarkable currency in the history of humanity. It's called the US dollar. Because you see, something remarkable happened in 1971, which changed the world and which is determining our future today. The dollar became the first currency in the history of the world that was issued by a hegemonic, powerful country, the United States of America, which was becoming increasingly hegemonic, increasingly dominant, as a result of something that German intellectuals find it very hard to understand, as a result of the deficit in the current account of that country and in the government budget. You see, from the Roman Empire onwards, when a large, powerful state, empire, went into the red, started being in debt,
Wenn so ein großer Staat auf
its
einmal
power
Schulden
shrunk.
hatte, dann
Whether it
hat
was the Roman
die
Empire,
Macht abgenommen,
the Spanish
sei
Empire,
es jetzt
the
das
British
römische
Empire.
Imperium, das spanische
The
Imperium, das
moment they
britische
went
Imperium. Immer im Moment, wo
schwarz,
es
black to red,
von den schwarzen
they
Zahlen
started
zu den roten ging,
losing
haben
their
sie
hegemony.
auch an
the
ihrer
United States of
Vorherrschaft gefunden. Das hat aber bei
The
den
United
Vereinigten
States
Staaten
of
von
America grew in power in proportion to the quantity of red ink that was dripping from its budget. That's strange. How did that happen? It's a very long story, but I'll cut it short. The German industrial miracle of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and so on, which is today in serious trouble. The European Union, our idea of progress, prosperity with low inflation and low unemployment. All these are the products of the system of Bretton Woods that was instituted by the United States. It began with the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. And then you remember the Deutschmark had a fixed exchange rate with the dollar, with the French franc, with the Greek drachma for that matter, for years. I mean, I grew up and I remember it was 30 drachmas to a dollar every year of my life until I was 15 years of age, right? Similarly, the Deutschmark was fixed. That was an American design. The basic idea was that after 1945, your country, my country, were in ashes, in ruins. The only creditor country was the United States. The only industrial power with functioning factories was the United States. They had a surplus. And their great concern was, how would they manage to sell their industrial products, washing machines, cars, and so on, after converting their armaments industry into civilian goods, from tanks to cars, from bullets to washing machines. They could produce so much in 1945, the Americans, that the American economy could not absorb all the washing machines and cars they could produce. So they wanted us Europeans to buy them. That makes perfect sense. But we didn't have any money. So they gave us money. It's called the Marshall Plan. And not just the Marshall Plan, but huge quantities of loans that were coming to this country, to France, to Greece, to Britain. Yeah? So what was happening was this. Bretton Woods was created as a single currency union, a monetary union. I mean, we didn't have the same currency, but we had fixed exchange rates, same thing. And how was this maintained? We all had a dollar. It was the dollar zone, right? It was maintained because the Americans, every time they sold a jet to Lufthansa or a Cadillac to some French person, to Alain Delon, let's say, in Paris, dollars that they had sent to us were going back, they were being repatriated to the United States. So as long as they had a surplus, they could give us dollars and then they would take them back with everything we bought from them. It was a recycling mechanism of dollars. But the moment they stopped having a surplus, they went into deficit from 1967 onwards, that system was doomed to fail. And the Americans are very different to the Europeans. Here in Europe, our system may be breaking down, but we keep trying to maintain it. The Americans, when their system breaks down, they destroy it themselves and they create something else. So they created the period of financialization after 1971. How did they do that? They threw Europe out of the dollar zone. We had Eurexit. You and we, all Europeans were thrown out of the dollar zone. And then we had the fluctuations. And then we Europeans started thinking of creating our own common currency, which became eventually the euro. But the whole period after 1971 is a period during which, and this is what explains how the United States became so dominant while being in deficit. And the more deficit they had, the more dominant they became. The dollar became an IOU, just a piece of paper where the Americans wrote something, a number down and said, this is the value. Now that sounds like a Ponzi currency, a fake currency. It's not. Because, think about it, today, and this is going to bring me to the new Cold War. Today, if you are Mercedes-Benz or BMW here in Bavaria, or if you are a Chinese aluminum producer in Shanghai, who will you sell your exports to? Where will you get most of your demand from? From the United States of America. They will pay you in dollars, using their deficit, using the fact that we want dollars even if we don't want anything to buy from the Americans. Because this is the only currency in the history of humanity that people want even if they don't want to buy anything from the country that produces it. Right? Why? Because if you want to buy aluminum from the Chinese, you have to pay them in dollars. So you have to take euros, exchange them for dollars to buy Chinese aluminum. If you want to buy oil from Nigeria, from a French company, no American is involved. You need dollars because this is the currency in which Nigerian oil is sold. So we want dollars, right? So they give us the dollars for our commodities, for the exports of the German, Japanese, Chinese capitalists. And what does the German capitalist do when he, I was about to say, or she, but it's usually he, unfortunately. What do they do with the money, the dollars they get? They take it back to Wall Street. And what do they do with it there? They buy land in Miami or in California, or they buy shares in American companies, or they buy American bonds, debt. So effectively, the German capitalist, the Chinese capitalist, the Japanese capitalist finances the deficit of the United States. This is how the deficits grow and the power of the United States grows. I'm coming now to the new Cold War. I don't know about you, but when a certain Mr. Donald Trump, remember him? Unfortunately, you will be remembering him very soon again, as it seems. I hope not, but it's very likely. Donald Trump made a decision which the New York Times, Frankfurter Allgemeine, Le Monde, dismissed as the move of a madman. He banned the Chinese telecommunications company Huawei. Remember that? 2016. And then he banned another Chinese communication company, ZTE. And then he slapped 25% tariff on Chinese aluminum. This was his trade war against China, right? And from then, I started wondering, why is he doing that? The answer that he's a madman was not an answer that satisfied me. Because even though he's a very poor excuse for human nature, a madman he's not. The answer that his people gave me when I asked them, and the answer that they gave in public was, because China wants Taiwan. I thought, what? China has wanted Taiwan since 1949. This is not news. Why did you let China into the World Trade Organization? Why did you let Apple go to Shenzhen and build the iPhones there? That Taiwan cannot be the answer. It's a constant. That has not changed. It's a ridiculous answer. Then they said, oh, but you know, the Chinese have been spying on us, Americans. What? The Americans, who are spying on Angela Merkel, are telling us that the problem with the Chinese that they are trying to spy on them doesn't wash. It was a question that I didn't have an answer to. Then Biden comes in, who is supposed to be the anti-Trump. The anti-Trump, the man who comes in to undo all the damage that Trump does. And what does he do with the Cold War, the new Cold War, trade war with China? He turbocharges it. He makes it worse or more intense. He issues an order banning the sale of all high-tech microchips to China. This is like issuing a statement that we, the United States of America, are going to prevent the Chinese, China, from becoming an advanced, technologically advanced society. That's declaration of economic war on China. Okay? Trump had not gone that far. Biden did. Why? He's not a madman either. I have an answer for you, which also explains the complete geostrategic insignificance of Europe, of all of us, Germans, Greeks, French. We are irrelevant geostrategically. The answer is that we have a new form of capital. A new form of capital. Capital, what's capital? I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about machines. I'm talking about produced means of production. Like, you know, a fishing rod that you use to fish is a piece of capital because you produced it to produce something else, the fish. A tractor is a capital good because you have it, you don't take it in order to go running around Munich. You get it in order to produce something else. It's a produced means of production, an industrial robot. All singing, all dancing, very modern one. It's a produced means of production. What lives in this phone? The algorithms, the data centers, the huge server farms in between Washington State and Utah and elsewhere. The optic fiber cables. This is all capital, but it is not meant to produce stuff. It is a produced means of manipulating our behavior. That has never happened before. Humans always wanted to manipulate the behavior of other humans, whether they were preachers, philosophers, we're in the School of Philosophy, you know, actors, playwrights, poets, politicians. They always wanted to modify people's behavior. But now, for the first time, we have machines that do it. And they do it dialectically, as Hegel would have said. We train them to train us, to train them, to train us, to train them, to train us, to train them, to give us desires, which then they satisfy directly by selling that stuff to us, bypassing every market, every capitalist market. That's not capitalism anymore. We have a new form of capital. I call it cloud capital in my latest book. And anyone who owns that capital has a capacity to own 40% of world income as we speak. Do you know 40% of world income is going to the owners of this cloud capital? Every time you buy something out of Amazon.com, 40% of what you pay goes to Jeff Bezos. And he doesn't do anything. He just has the capital, which modifies your behavior and turns the capitalists into vassals, as in feudalism. That's why I call the system we live in techno-feudalism. Now, why am I telling you this now? As a prelude to concluding regarding the need for non-alignment. Because there are only two locations of cloud capital: the United States of America and China. Why do you think the German car industry is kaput? Why? You produce lots of cars. Volkswagen produces lots of electric cars. So does BMW and Mercedes-Benz. Well, I'll tell you what. Compare them with Tesla, Elon Musk's Tesla, and BYD, the Chinese Tesla, right? Being Build Your Dreams, which is going to become bigger than Tesla very soon. When you buy a Volkswagen, Volkswagen gets 50,000 euros, end of story, that's it. And then maybe some money every now and then for servicing the car. But Volkswagen doesn't get any more of that. Moreover, most of that money doesn't go to Volkswagen because Volkswagen does not have the battery technology, because for 15 years, Germany has not even been investing in battery technologies. They have to import the battery technology from elsewhere. So very low value added, one payment, forget it, nothing more than that. You know what Elon Musk gets? By the way, did you know that a Tesla or a BYD, you buy a Tesla, brand new, you're driving around, you feel really good about yourself. You know that Elon Musk has a button he can press and your car doesn't move? Do you know that? No, go and check it. He can stop it. It's like a phone. If Apple wants to stop your iPhone from working, it can stop your iPhone from working with one command from the satellite, from the cell tower. You know that in the United States, as we speak, here too, if you buy a second-hand Tesla and you do not register it with a Tesla dealership, then they stop updating it, and then after a while it doesn't go. Do you know that as you are driving around Tesla, it knows what music you're listening to, what mood you are in, where you're going, why you're going, what have you bought where you went to the shops with in the car, and this is all data that Elon Musk sells to Amazon.com in real time. That's the power of cloud capital. The Chinese have it, the Americans have it, the Germans don't have it. Europe, we don't have that. Have you wondered why, if there is tomorrow going to be, and I hope there is going to be, a peace conference to end the war, the bloody war in Ukraine? Who is going to represent Europe? We know who is going to represent Ukraine: Zelensky, Russia, Putin, America. Who is going to represent us? Not Olaf Scholz. He will be blocked by the Finns and by the Estonians, who think that Olaf Scholz is too close to Putin. They won't let Emmanuel Macron, because they think Emmanuel Macron is too close to Putin. So the Germans and the French will have to pay for Ukraine, but the German and the French people will not be represented around that table. This is the state in which Europe is today. And instead, we have Putin, who wants nothing more than that for that war to continue forever. Forever and ever, an endless war, because the moment it ends, his own authority is going to be destabilized. Same with Zelensky. The moment the war ends, Zelensky is finished. Same with Biden. Biden needs this endless war because he needs to have a bulwark against Trump. And he needs the New Mexican and Texan oil and gas fracking producers to keep selling us hugely expensive natural gas here in Germany without a resolution of any kind of dispute in the eastern part of Europe. So you see, they need one another. Similar, take Netanyahu. What is Netanyahu's greatest nightmare? Peace. If peace breaks out in Israel, he's finished. He has no reason to exist. He will be overthrown. He will probably end up in jail by his own people. Right? So we have never-ending wars being propelled by the people in power. NATO is a bit like the mafia. It creates the threat and the insecurity, which allows it to sell to us security and protection. I asked once... Once I asked a fellow academic who used to be the chief of staff of NATO, and before that, he was the NSA deputy director, appointed by George W. Bush, not some left-winger, right? And I said to him, Bob, why do we need NATO these days? This was in 2012. Why do we need NATO these days? And the answer was, we need, meaning the United States, as an American. That was in Texas, where I used to teach then. And he said, Yanis, don't you know why? We need to keep Germany down, us in Europe, and the Russians on edge. That's the point of NATO, to create insecurity in order to then sell us security. So Putin wants an endless war, NATO wants an endless war, what are we going to do? Well, we need European sovereignty. We need non-alignment. We need to say neither Putin nor NATO. In the same way that, remember back in 2003 when I think that was a very, very courageous decision by the German government then, Schröder, not to play any role in the invasion of Iraq. It was not. Schröder was not a friend of Saddam Hussein, but he understood that the invasion of Iraq would bring about ISIS. It would bring about an escalation of misanthropy. 1 million people dead, right? Similarly, for us today, we can see that the clouds of the new Cold War are thickening and darkening between the cloud capital of the United States and the cloud capital of China. It is really very easy for a spark to ignite a major catastrophe. We can see that climate catastrophe is coming because those two bits of cloud capital are not allowing the people of the United States and the people of China and the people of Europe to converge in order to have a discussion about how we're going to end the climate emergency. Instead, what are we doing? We are having COP28 in the United Arab Emirates, and we appoint the head of an oil company to lead the fight against climate change. This is the degree of our stupidity. We Europeans are the stupid continent. We are rich. We have the fantastic tradition of these universities. We have intelligence. We have a history of philosophy, of science, of expertise. We are the richest continent in the world, and we play no role whatsoever. We let Washington and Mr. Stoltenberg. Who is Mr. Stoltenberg to tell us that we need a never-ending war? That's why we are canvassing for non-alignment, but a new kind of non-alignment. Not the old one I mentioned, and this is how I end, that we must not repeat the mistakes of the non-alignment movement. Because the non-aligned movement back then, you mentioned Kampala, the conference, the mistake was to think that if the third world gets together, it was called third world, now it's now called the global south. We are full of, euphemisms. If the developing world, the global south, gets together, and that will be a bulwark against the bad people in the north, in the global north. That's not so. There are truly nasty people in the global south. Truly nasty people in the global south. This whole thing about the BRICS. The BRICS are the great force that will clash with NATO and the United States. The Saudi Arabians want to go into the BRICS. There's no more vile regime, murderous regime, misogynic regime than that. They're not our friends. The new non-aligned movement must be a grassroots movement, not a governmental movement, and it must involve the people in Germany, the people in Nigeria, the people in South Africa, the people in China, the people in the United States of America, most of whom have been very hard done by globalization, and it is their deaths of despair that are feeding the beast of fascism through Trump. So, we have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Vielen Dank für den Vortrag, für den Input, Herr Varoufakis.
Thank you very much for your lecture. It's a white bridge we are building here from the perspective, I don't want to repeat the word of the global south because it's too much blurring up. Many experiences from pacifism, from a new image of the humanity over to economy and major structures of the world, power structures. But I leave it to you now to pose the according questions. And yes, you may start. We start here.
Oh, sorry.
To explain it to you as well. To explain, we have 3 persons on the podium, so we said we will, well, women shall pose the questions, preferably, not only.
Thank you for showing us the problem and
She's speaking in
explaining us
English,
the
that's
problem.
good.
Can you also tell us what is at least the first step for the solution? What can we do to change and to stop the vicious circle?
Well, this is now the first round. The first 3 questions are just for you. And we would, if you want to answer right away, or we just collect 3 questions.
It's up to you. You're the boss.
Okay. Yes. I don't know why I switched to English. Ja, also wir sammeln erst 3 Fragen und dann würden Sie antworten. We just collect 3 questions and then it's your turn to answer.
So we collect 3 questions and then it's your turn to answer. Somewhere here. Yeah, as we are with the peace movement today, I want to pose a very basic question. I don't know who of you 3 want to answer it. What do you think about the idea with regard to Ukraine to surrender cities without a fight and, showing the white flag? And thank you very much for your lecture to all 3. My question is directed in particular with regard to the Kurdish perspective. As a Kurdish feminist, I would be interested in hearing what you think about the struggles or the wars and the genocide which is taking place in the Near East. And we, as the Kurdish people, do suffer under these wars for a long time already as well. Of course, I think the solution is not to be found in nation states. If you could, if you are somewhat involved into the Kurdish perspective and their problems, we have also a perspective about life and dignity and so on. And I would like to know how about your approach towards the Kurdish question.
Your question in 3 words: woman, life, freedom. And now a few more words on the same subject. Was it not horrendous how the West treated the Peshmerga, the great fighters, Kurdish fighters, who bore the brunt of the war against ISIS? Even the United States, who had declared the Kurdish fighters to be a terrorist organization, had an alliance with them because they needed them. And after the Kurds, and remember those women that fought, the women fighters of the Peshmerga, after they defeated ISIS, what does the United States and Europe do? Drop the Kurdish cause like a hot brick. So, solidarity with our Kurdish comrades, especially the women, because to be a woman that bears arms against Islamic fundamentalists in the mountains of Iraq, in the mountains of Syria, that is a bravery beyond the comprehension of the European mind. So, solidarity.
One important point, though, that I want to share with you. I want to share with you a dilemma I have, an ambiguity that I follow, that I have in me. You know, when the human life freedom demonstrations in Iran started, together with comrades of mine, of ours, Iranians, we tried to support the demonstrators, and we still do, to the greatest possible degree. At the same time, I have to tell you that I do not want to see the United States security forces and military forces and Pentagon planners succeed in overthrowing the regime, the awful regime in Tehran, the patriarchal misogynist regime in Tehran, the theocratic regime in Tehran, to install another Shah-like puppet government serving the interests of the United States. So I'm caught up in this dilemma, and I'm confessing this to you. I do not want the Tehran government to lose and to be overthrown by what NATO wants to impose there, and I want to oppose them at the very same time supporting the demonstrators on the streets. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you. I want now to go to Ukraine. Thank you for posing this question. The day that Putin's troops invaded Ukraine, I came out with, well, this was the best I could do. I put something on my post, on my site, an article, and the title was, "We must all stand with Ukraine against the criminal invasion of Vladimir Putin." I happen to think, personally, that Vladimir Putin is a criminal, and I thought that, at some personal cost, in 2001, when I was speaking as an academic now, not as a politician, back then I was very far away from being anything like a politician. I was a member of the Senate of the University of Athens. And I remember one day at the Senate meeting, the Greek government, back then, the government of Simitis, Social Democratic, had sent a request, which was more like an order, to the Senate of the University of Athens, that we award an honorary doctorate to a certain Mr. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia then. Because you forget, do you, that Putin was the favorite son of the West in Russia at the time. They did their utmost to support that criminal. And I stood up in the Senate and I said, this man has killed 250,000 people in Chechnya, 250,000 people in Chechnya, erased Grozny completely on the basis of an Islamophobic narrative in order to solidify his own presidency in the Kremlin. And you want us to give, I was in minority of one. Everybody else voted. Yeah? I remember 6 months later, I was in London with a friend of mine, you may have heard of him, a politician called Jeremy Corbyn. We were together outside the Russian embassy in London demonstrating against Putin. And we were being portrayed by the establishment, by the liberal establishment, as eccentrics and extremists. So, my position on Putin could not be clearer than it is, correct? However, at the very same time, looking at the facts on the ground, looking at what was going on within Ukraine, our movement, the M25, immediately we tried to think hard on what is the best course of action now, given that Putin's troops are attacking Kharkiv, they're attacking Donbass, they're attacking Kyiv. And our suggestion was, because I believe you must always not just say no to whatever it is happening, but you have to have answers as to what would you have done differently, right? We said that the only solution that we can see, which is consistent with Ukrainian independence and sovereignty, and the interest of the Ukrainian people and of the Russian people and Europeans and the global South, because of the famine that was boosted as a result of the magnificent rise in the price of fertilizers, of food and so on, was to kill that war immediately on the basis of a deal whereby Russian troops would go back to barracks, back to where they were before the 24th of February, on the basis of a deal between Zelensky, Biden, Putin, and President Xi of China. A deal that would bring the Russians back to their barracks and to give something to Putin, because you have to give him something in order to agree, a guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, along the lines of the Austrian setup during the Cold War, where Austria was a fully fledged member of liberal democratic Europe, social democratic Europe. It was completely integrated with the West, but it was not a member of NATO. That is, I thought that, and I still think that, is something that Putin would be able to sell to his own cabal as some kind of success. What did we get instead? Ursula von der Leyen, Joe Biden, doing two things that guarantee a never-ending war that will be the destruction of Ukraine and the permanent subjugation of Europe to the United States. The first thing they did was Biden made a statement by which he committed the United States government to dragging Vladimir Putin through the International Criminal Court, which, by the way, the United States does not recognize. So this is hypocrisy galore, right? But even if you set this aside, now, how do you grab Putin and put him through the International Criminal Court, like Milosevic was? Either you have to take Moscow, which is not likely, given that America, Germany, Greece, France, we are cowards. We are not sending our own troops to fight with the Ukrainians. We send them guns, and we send them third-rate guns. And we say to them, you go and take Moscow, so that we can drag Putin through the International Criminal Court. That is cowardice. That is stupidity. That is a great gift to Putin. Nobody has gifted Putin more than the West. The West has done everything we have done, our leaders, has solidified the reign of Putin. Okay? The second move they made, have you noticed that now they're going, first of all, they confiscated $400 billion of central bank Russian money. Okay? But they don't even have the courage to take the money. They are going to issue bonds backed by these monies to give to the Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainians will never be able to repay those bonds because they're bankrupt. So it means that you are setting aside the Russian central bank money for the next 10, 20 years, depending on the maturity of those bonds. And effectively, you are telling Putin that there can be no peace where you take your own money back for 20 years, and then it will be the creditors, the Paris Club banks that will take it. It is as if the devil wanted to create circumstances for a never-ending war that continues to kill people in Ukraine and keeping Putin in power, the devil would have done that which the Western leaders have done. So no white flag. For me, non-alignment is not neutrality. I do not renounce violence. I hate violence. I work for peace. But, you know, I am proud of the Greek partisans who fought during the Nazi occupation. And I am proud of Palestinians who resist the apartheid state. And I'm proud of people who resist in Ukraine Russia's invasion. But I want to be non-aligned. I want us democratically to decide what we Europeans want to happen, not to be told by Washington, D.C. what should happen. Finally, what needs to be done? That's a very big question, right? But let me give you an example. Look, technically, a Green New Deal for the world, whereby you energize a large amount of the capital which is sloshing around in the financial circuits in Wall Street, in Frankfurt, in the City of London, doing nothing useful here for humanity. A Green New Deal that energizes that money and converts them into green investments in the Global South. Technically, it is straightforward. Already, the blueprint exists in the Bretton Woods Conference, which I mentioned before. It is the plan by John Maynard Keynes, which was rejected at Bretton Woods, brought up to date with all the new instruments of public finance that we have. We can do it. So technically it can be done. The reason why it's not being done is because a lot of money is being made by very few individuals who have bought our politics, who have bought our media, and who are poisoning with the algorithms our conversation, preventing us from reaching the decision that is necessary to energize these technological innovations that could save the planet, but will not save the planet unless you folks get off your backsides and take politics into your own hands.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Es gibt einfach so viel zu sagen und so viel zu verändern.
There's such a lot to
Von
say and
daher,
such a lot to
aber
change.
die Zeit geht
I mean,
voraus,
so
von
far,
daher müssen wir jetzt eine kleine
time's walking
Änderung
on,
machen.
so we
Also
have
es
to
ist
do
so,
a
wir haben
little
eine
change.
Frage aus dem
One question
Online-Chat
from the
für Herrn
online-chat
Mabanza
for
Bambu.
Mr. Mabanza
Und
Bambu,
ich würde
and
sagen, wir
I
nehmen
would
noch
say
zwei Fragen für
we
jeweils
take two more questions
Herrn
for
Müller und Herrn Varoufakis.
Mr. Miller and
Und
Mr.
jetzt müssen wir
Varoufakis
nach
each.
dem System gehen.
So
Wer hat
let's
eine
follow the
Frage für
system
Herrn
of
Müller?
who has
Okay, und wer hat eine Frage für Herrn Varoufakis? Möglichst eine Frau. Okay. Gut.
Okay, I
stopp.
should put the microphone a bit higher.
Ja,
a bit higher.
also bevor ich meine Frage an den Herrn
So my
Müller stelle,
question to
möchte ich
Mr.
noch eine
Miller.
gute Nachricht
First
bringen,
of all, I
weil
want
hier
to
die
bring
Frage
a
war
good message
bezüglich
because the
eines
question was with
Schulsystems,
regard to
das
this
eben den Kindern
educational
also eine
system
Selbstregulierung
to allow
ermöglicht, eine Erziehung, die eben nicht von oben nach unten drückt.
education
Da
not
gibt es
from
in Deutschland ein wunderbares
up and
Beispiel,
up, not
was schon
from
seit 30 Jahren
top to down.
existiert,
There
die
is a system
Glockse-Schule in
in
Hannover.
Germany,
Die
which
hat
is the
gegründet der Herr
Glockse School
Oskar
in
Necht,
Hannover,
der ist leider jetzt vor
founded
kurzem
by
ist
Mr.
gerade
Oskar
gestorben,
Necht,
gestern.
and he had built the school on the principle of self-regulation, where the children develop their own goals together with the class. So, and there were about 150 schools of this type in Germany. But now my question, Mr. Miller. As we all know, we are in the year of birth, in the anniversary year of Immanuel Kant, and he wrote the famous essay on eternal peace. And I can recommend this to everybody. You can buy it for €6. And there are about 20 points, but one of the most important points, as I think, is the recommendation, the demand to that which Immanuel Kant formulated already 200 years ago, which is abolish all armies. And my question is, what do you think about this demand, this recommendation, Mr. Müller? Okay, that's the best part of the text by Kant, and I think you have to take it serious. I'm at the moment maybe shortly able to say something about the white flag. What I would say about this, I would like to make it a bit concrete. When Mariupol was under threat from the Russians, I thought it would be the best thing to show the white flag. And I was told, well, you can easy talk, but ich kann den nicht sehen. Machst du das bitte? Oder lass.
Thank you very much. Now the second question is to Mr. Bambu. It's an internet question. How could a turn of our energies on the basis of humanity and not on plundering African resources? Well, thank you very much for this question, although it's not easy to answer. I would like to take this opportunity to take up some aspects from the discussion. the question for a white flag. Indeed, when the war started, I thought that this might be a failure of the worldwide peace movement, that we hadn't anticipated such a scenario, and we hadn't practiced such a scenario. Which answers there could be, which non-violent answers there could be to such an attack. And I mean that in the history of mankind, or if I take Dr. Kind in the civil rights movement, Gandhi fighting for independence, how we see aspects, what a loss of faith it means for the attacker to meet people who suffer from violence but do not answer with violence. Training that on a large scale and trying that on a large scale would be worth an attempt, but this can only function if it's done from the very beginning, from the very moment the weapons took the language. The moment the weapons started, it was too late for that. In view of the fact that in everyday political operations we have a lot of crazy figures, and we should be prepared that the madness by Putin has not been the last one, and we should draw the conclusion that we have to form the structures and that we have to create concepts and we have to train these reactions. Now, on the actual question, I'll keep it short and simple. And the peoples of the South have an idea, and I would recommend you this suggestion, and you can read it up on the internet. It sums up everything. I do not think it's a good idea to change the form of energy to make no changes in the West. We go to Namibia. We occupy area to produce energy from the sun and the wind, and to change water to ammoniac to transport it to Europe, and here it has to be changed back to be used by industry. And in order to have the steel industry in Germany and France, who needs it to have that bauxite comes from Guinea, manganese from South Africa, from Congo, that the value-added chain stays here in Germany. This way of thinking, in my opinion, isn't worth anything. And this energy change from bottom up, and all scientists agree here, and for countries like Namibia who have a deficit of energy, the direct production of energy is the best form. This means wind power, solar power, this would not only lead to a decentralization in a country like Namibia with a large area and a small population. It would prevent the energy from being commercialized, from robbed, and it's the energy of the future. An involvement of the African countries into the requirements of the industrialized nations. This used to be an agenda. Some still think they have the power to push this through and reproduce it and stabilize it for years. And if I can take up a sentence from Mr. Valkagnet, wir brauchen die Bewegung von unten. Wir brauchen Grassroots-Bewegungen. Ich nehme Menschen in Afrika, ich sehe junge Menschen in Afrika, women's rights movements. We want bottom-up movements responding to our requirements. Everything that creates a dependence on power blocks, we do not want that. We can do without you. Thank you very much.
Okay, wie schön. Ah. My question is, how would you assess the fair trade movement? Would it change something for the global south, or is it just fair trade? Fair trade. This would be a question to you, Mr. Mabanzu, and maybe Mr. Well, first of all, Mr. Mabanza, and then in short, please briefly, and everybody has a chance for a final statement, because then after that we have to finish. So only in short, Mr. Mabanza. I'm in a dilemma because of the briefness of the answer. Well, dilemma because reality is not easy to believe that world trade could remain as it is in a niche if we orient to certain criteria and everything becomes pretty nice. That's far too easy. So like this fair trade idea. And to say fair trade is not good, is a bashing which is not just towards this movement, because the idea, the vision behind it was to establish what is going wrong and to show how it can work in a different way. After 40, 50 years, we can find that we remain in this niche. Even in some places, there was something like a reproduction of colonial logic, like, for example, products which, like coffee, cacao, and so on, which are also where also the profits are made, even in fair trade, here and not in the countries where they are from. So it is a movement from below, but after all, if a trade agreement structurally includes the right of people to work and everything, but if it doesn't, then we don't need any sustainability arguments.
English. Okay. And everything that's fair is really truly fair.
Very quickly, look, fair trade is a cop-out. It's not the answer. Let me give you an example. Zambia, as we speak, is bankrupt. And it is negotiating with the International Monetary Fund for $1 billion. $1 billion is what it doesn't have. It's not much. And the IMF, in order to lend to Zambia again to prevent its bankruptcy, is demanding the shutting down of hospitals, of schools, the privatization of public common goods. In other words, another colonial exploitation of Zambia. Now, let me add another number, which is crucial. Over the last 3.5 years, not 4 years, not 5 years, 3.5 years, European and American companies extracted from Zambia minerals that they then sold for 26 billion. You take 26 billion from them, they're indebted by 1 billion, and then our representatives from the International Monetary Fund, which belongs to Europe and the United States, goes to Zambia and shuts down their schools. This is a crime against humanity that no rubbish idea about fair trade and market can reverse.
Herzlichen Dank, liebes Publikum, liebe Zuhörerinnen online.
Thank you very much to the audience. Thank you very much to the listeners. I know there are so many questions asked, but unfortunately I need to end our discussion. I hope you will continue your discussions in your families and with friends, circles, at work, no matter where you are, where you meet people, and whenever you have an opportunity. We have gained many insights where we can make changes, small scale changes. Here we will see the election for the European Parliament. Before closing, dear lecturers, I would like to ask you to give you a short statement. What would you like to give these people to think about on their way home?
I'll just repeat the main story that I shared with you. Europe is becoming geostrategically irrelevant because we have become colonized by the competing powers of the United States and China, the cloud capital that rules the world, which are quick marching us into a new Cold War, which may end up in a new Third World War, preventing us from doing anything about climate catastrophe and preventing us from the urgent redistribution of income from the global north to the global south. And unless you folks take politics into your own hands, humanity has no future.
So,
now I would like to add to the philosophy of the Baptists What we need, as a matter of fact, is what the Baptists say again and again. We need to create a world where there is room for many worlds. To start all this, to take all efforts, we need to support everybody, and we really need to activate all the skills we have worldwide. I do not talk of material resources. I think of the moral, the intellectual, and the spiritual resources. This is the only opportunity we have of avoiding a repetition of the same thing. What we have to find that our civilization is moving into a direction where many things that are important to us, that makes us as human beings, has been put aside to find an answer to the present crisis. We need this overall approaches in the perceptions of the world around us, but also in the perception of human beings. And it's important to become active. And now my last sentence, this becoming active is especially important in the context of Europe, taking up the ideas we said before. For a long time we considered ourselves to be the center of the world, and we still do so. We should realize that that a lot of things that are going wrong and needs to be elaborated on, needs a change from if we cannot change it from Europe, what Western worlds have caused in damage all over the world, we shouldn't think that we will have a solution for what is going on in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in Uganda. The context we know best is our German or European Greek context. Let's focus on that. Let's focus on concentrating this, maybe the contribution we can make to change things there. As Europe, if we take us back, if we let the processes there develop in peace without the disruption Europe has brought into this region for centuries. Okay, machst du mal.
Session today. Many things went through my mind which shook me out of balance. And the brilliant analysis of Yanis Varoufakis made me detect in me a tendency towards rage. I got rageous with you together against the many wrong developments in the world. And of course we have to have that, but we must also be able to check that rage and keep it under control. And that's why I want to end this with a statement of this great philosopher and pacifist Bertrand Russell, who did say, "Love is wise and hatred is foolish." Thanks. And a rose is a rose is a rose.
Also vielen Dank für das wunderbare Schlussstatement. Lassen Sie mich bitte noch, bevor wir aufstehen und rausgehen, bitte lassen Sie noch hinweisen auf die Veranstaltungen morgen. Morgen Sonntag 10 Uhr im Eine Welthaus können Sie Basa, Rotem Levin Osama,
be able
oh
to
Gott,
listen to
Elevat treffen.
and meet these people and the Competitors for Peace. It starts at 10 o'clock in the Eine Welt House. First, we're going to start with a film. Then you will be able to talk to them. In the evening at 5 p.m., there will be a retrospective of the security conference and our competitors. What was the name? And there will be a representative with Ralf Becker and Matthias Linnemann. And at 6 o'clock in the house, there will the former Nasdaq in Barbarossa Street. And now I would like to thank my
Heute sind wir ja schon bei 3,5 Stunden, gestern waren es gute 3 Stunden. Ich finde es eine Wahnsinnsleistung und bitte kommen Sie zu uns auf die Bühne. Ich möchte allen mithelfenden Organisationen und vor allem die im 25 danken, die dieses Mal so tatkräftig mit eingesprungen sind. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit und einen guten Nachhauseweg.
That's yours. Don't give it away.
Ich habe noch 2 Leute vergessen. Ich will noch ganz herzlich danken dem Richard, der hier alles um das Haus managt. Und ich will noch danken dem Niklas, der diese Technik heute ganz, ganz alleine gemanagt hat.